It's Michelangelo Signorile. He's is the author of a brand new book, and it is right here. It's called "It's Not Over," and I realize that all of you are seeing this backwards.
Everything's backwards.
I don't know. Everything's backwards.
Everything's backwards.
We have the camera turned around, but you know, I don't know why. You figure it out anyway.
But it's not overthebook.com. You could see it the right way.
Yeah. So.
Hi Andy.
Hi. I actually read this book several weeks ago. Michelangelo and I are actually good. He's a really great friend of mine, and we've talked about a lot of the stuff that's in the book. It could not come at a better time. You know, with everything that's going on in the LGBT rights movement right now and all the opposition that we're getting from conservatives, I think it's a very, very, very important book for people to read, especially to understand how we got to this moment in time and sort of where we go from here. I would say that the book is kind of a primer for the next generation of activists and activism going forward. Let's talk about what happened this week in Indiana, which with all the religious liberty bill that came up and the one in Arkansas and the 20 others that are in various states around the country. They didn't just sort of like come out of nowhere.
What I talk about in the first chapter of It's Not Over, the first chapter is titled Victory Blindness. And it's kind of like something that a lot of activists and a lot of allies of gay rights and a lot of progressives kind of succumb to. And I think it happened in other movements too. It happened in the women's movement. It happened with African Americans, where you think you've arrived, you think you've won everything. And a lot of people were sort of thinking marriage equality was here. All these states were having marriage. The Supreme Court's going to rule in our favor. And they were blind to the fact that the enemies of equality are organizing, and they're coming up with ways to thwart wins and kind of like diminish them. So they can't totally block you because you've won certain things, but they can do things to make you, you know, diminished. And what I was seeing, like, because I go to a lot of these right-wing conferences with my radio show, Conservative Political Action Conference, Values Voters Summit, I was seeing them recalibrating and rebranding the bigotry that they have and new ways to kind of, you know, create a bubble for themselves, not to deal with LGBT people. So that's where a lot of these religious liberty bills kind of came out of, was they're planning ways to limit gay rights. What ways can they do to block this whole marriage thing?
Why do you think they sort of came up with that, you know, term and that, you know, that idea to go after, you know, religious freedom?
Because they're looking for the things that can hit the public at large, like, and that big middle that's unsure still about a lot of stuff. Like, they know that Americans by and large believe in fairness and believe in equality, but they also know that Americans are uncomfortable about certain things. So, like, they know that most Americans don't think you should discriminate against people based on race, but then they also know that maybe people are uncomfortable with affirmative action, and they could kind of tap into that discomfort with that idea, right? So I think they're doing that now with gay people. They're trying to tap into the discomfort that people might have with the idea of a baker having to bake a cake even if they don't really support somebody's wedding. You know, a lot of the polling shows that people are uncomfortable maybe with that idea, because we still have to really show why that is discrimination. So they see religious liberty and religious freedom as something Americans support, and a way that they can kind of sell this hate in another way.
A few months ago, when the Brendan Eich, who had just been named the CEO of Mozilla, people uncovered a lot of his beliefs and his writings, you know, going way back, and, you know, discovered that he was opposed to marriage equality and, you know, had all of these anti-gay views.
And he'd given money to anti-gay candidates and money to Proposition 8 and other things.
Yeah, and when he was sort of forced out of his position, the right wing tried to portray it as if there was these like huge groups of gay activists that were coming after Brendan Eich,
Right.
and some people who you might have thought would, actually, disagree with them, kind of stepped back. Some gay and lesbian activists kind of stepped back and said, we're being too hard on this guy. We should give him a little bit of a break, and be more magnanimous about it because we've won so many victories recently.
David Brooks in the New York Times wrote a column that said, gays are being too forceful with the Indiana situation. They should be magnanimous. Americans are changing, and they shouldn't push too hard. And to me, that's a real trap, that kind of thinking, because it allows the right to advance the backlash. And that's what happened during the Brendan Eich and Mozilla controversy. He stepped down because the culture of Silicon Valley and the developers at Mozilla and the people who work for the company, they all support full civil rights, and they were letting the company know they weren't going to donate their time, because a company like Mozilla, it's really a foundation where developers are donating their time. They were like, we don't want to, really be supporting this guy. And yet Andrew Sullivan, whipped up this heated, anger toward gay activists when gay activists never really no gay groups had said that he should step down. And the right wing took Andrew Sullivan's comments and used them against the gay movement, saying, Andrew Sullivan says gay groups are attacking him. And what I saw was other activists also got very nervous about this. Mm-hmm. They got nervous about the idea of somebody losing their job because they gave money to Prop 8. Mm-hmm. And I think they were more so worried about the way it was playing out in the media, but it played out that way because we didn't control the debate and show it for what it was, that it was a nice societal shift, that finally somebody was being held to the same standards of, if he were somebody who made anti-Semitic comments, or if he made racist comments. Instead, they got scared, and what we saw was our side was very disjointed and not unified, while the right was organized, and Newt Gingrich was calling it the new fascism, and they were advancing that debate and making us look like we were the bullies.
We'd just gone through a couple weeks of win after win after win after win in marriage equality. And so it felt like we were, sort of getting so, ahead of where we'd been for so long that people were a little afraid, I think, to, worried about ruining it.
The word magnanimous kept coming up. One blogger, Jim Burraway, who I think does great work, he said something like, "We've had a banner 2 years. Can't we be more magnanimous?" And Frank Bruni, the New York Times columnist, who's gay and does great stuff, he too said, this makes the victors look, bad. And I think it was George Will said, we're being sore losers. So there was that idea that we should be magnanimous and accept this bigotry because we'd won so much. And I don't think we were even near winning. And that's why I think I call it victory blindness.
After this week and all of the Indiana coverage in the media over the religious liberty bill, do you think that that sort of the blinders to what the right wing is trying to do with these bills has sort of been ripped off?
I think so, to a certain extent. I think more people get it now. But the unfortunate thing was that even a few weeks ago, Arkansas passed a horrendous law that stripped away all local ordinances within the state for anti-discrimination for LGBT people, and nobody paid attention. Walmart didn't say anything. The Human Rights Campaign didn't say anything. Nobody said anything, and it's great that this debate played out now over the religious liberty bill, but in the end, we may have won a media debate, but we lost a lot in terms of actual rights. People lost protections. And I hope we've learned how to organize better after this whole thing and stick together.
I've seen like a lot of the bills that have been on the table that are similar to the Indiana bill and the Arkansas bill just dying this week because of the attention that Indiana has gotten. Do you foresee any kind of new strategy coming out of this for the right wing?
I think they will definitely retool, recalibrate. They move on to other states. They look for other avenues. They look for other people they can pose as victims, right? Any new way that they can sort of strip something away from us. Conscience clauses, allowing people to opt out of, performing gay marriages. All that stuff is still going on and still on the table in a lot of states.
Mm-hmm. So do you think it's just going to sort of maybe get more granular in the way that they approach it? Like they'll try to pass a religious liberty bill, but just in a certain area. Education or somewhere.
Yeah, and I think they also will look for opportunities when they can do it more under the radar, because let's not forget the whole larger history of this. This went on in Arizona last year at this time, and it somehow got above the radar. And then, the media cycle goes on to other issues, and then all of a sudden they passed one in Mississippi, and nobody paid attention. And then
why do you think it is that all of a sudden, one of these bills gets the spotlight and the others don't?
It's so hard to know. Is it a particular company? Is it somebody speaking out? Is it a group? Is it that week the media just didn't have news? Is it one particular pundit or one particular interviewer latches onto it and the others want to compete? It's so hard to know, but they moved on to Mississippi, nobody paid attention, and then just before this they passed this Arkansas law and nobody paid attention. So I'm thinking they're going to try even the religious liberties bill in some other places, and they'll look for an opportunity when maybe the media is not paying attention and get it passed.
With the upcoming Supreme Court arguments and ruling, which will probably be in our favor, do you think, if the Supreme Court does rule in our favor, that there's going to be a whole nother wave of victory blindness that we have to watch out for?
Yes.
And how do we avoid getting distracted by that?
Well, that's why I wrote this book. And I talk about in the book kind of celebrating these victories because you have to celebrate them. There's no question about it. But understanding that there isn't this magical moment when everything is finished and you go on with your life. When you're a minority, a marginalized group, you've been dealt a certain deck, and there are always going to be people out to try to undermine you, and you have to just keep paying attention. And I think once we sort of have that knowledge, you start to look at it in a different way. And we have to be thinking about the next generation and the fact that all these victories are great if you live in a certain place and you are an adult, but in fact, the victories themselves are making young people, and they watch TV, they see all these people out of the closet. It's making them come out of the closet at younger ages, but they're growing up in religious right households, and they're being thrown out of the house, or they're being put into ex-gay therapy programs, which are still legal in most states except for 3 jurisdictions now, and they're still horribly taking their lives and being bullied and in horrible ways. So in a way, our victories are actually bringing on more homophobia for young people. And
that's what I love about your book, is that it provides some solutions and some ways that people can really fight back. One of the other concepts that you talk about is this concept called covering. After we come out, we sort of have to keep coming out every day for the rest of our lives.
Right.
And the concept of covering, maybe you can talk a little bit about what that is, but it's sort of just remaining vigilant of that and making sure that we emphasize our differences, rather than downplaying them.
Yeah, there's an impulse for all groups, minorities, African American, women, every racial minority, and LGBT people, to sort of downplay. Once you sort of reach a certain point and get a certain rights, there's an idea of like, oh, I should downplay my difference to fit in and to show them that I'm fitting in. And that's what Kenji Yoshino calls covering. The moment you start covering, you're already ceding ground. And he talks about a covering demand. The society kind of demands you to cover.
So, like, what's an example of somebody covering?
Like a perfect example that I talk about in the book is when people don't show affection among each other as gay people, right? And Michael Sam, he didn't cover, right? He could have assimilated right in.
He could have just, he chose to kiss his
and that
boyfriend.
Showed what is the next frontier, because it caused such an outrage and such uproar. That was getting beyond tolerance. Tolerance was covering. We know you're gay, just don't touch each other, just don't kiss. And we see it throughout popular culture. Modern Family is covering, even though they have.
How are they covering?
Even though they're parents, they don't have sex.
Right.
They're not affectionate. That show had a great episode where the straight parents were having sex in bed and the kids walked in on them. You'd never see that with the gay couple, and we don't see it at all in popular culture. So all of that is covering, and that's our next frontier. Like, and there's an impulse.
Are there any shows out there now that are doing it right?
Well, I think that How to Get Away with Murder is kind of really groundbreaking in that way. Shonda Rhimes and Peter Norwalk, who's gay, who is the producer of that, like, they have one character in there who really likes having sex, and he's gay, and he has a lot of sex, and he has had boyfriends, and he's trying to, trying to not.
And it's pretty graphic too in terms of what they show.
To me, that at least kind of makes people see who we are, not just accepting people as gay, but accepting people, in the full picture.
But there are also other forms of covering, like covering in the media too. And you talk a little bit about the speculation that various politicians are gay, and if that's right or wrong. A couple of the examples that you bring up are Aaron Schock and Shepard Smith from Fox News.
Right. The glass closet. Like I talk about, where I kind of expanded on Kenji Yoshino's idea with covering is, he talks about passing, which is the closet, and then covering, which is after people out of the closet, kind of downplaying being gay. And I sort of put the glass closet at the hinge point between passing and covering, where people are sort of out, but they're not really out, where everybody knows they're out in the media, everybody at work where they work knows they're out. Robin Roberts at Good Morning America, everybody knew she was a lesbian, but we all had to wait until she put it on Facebook. That's the glass closet. And the glass closet is...
But the idea of being outraged at people asking valid questions about, a politician who's, voted against gay rights.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it becomes an issue of, okay, if people are going to be in the glass closet, then we should have a right to talk about it and speculate, but more so a duty when it's really relevant, like a politician who's voting anti-gay. The media has a duty to, look at that. I mean, when Aaron Schock's office was decorated very elaborately, some sort of, alarm bell went off about that visual cue that he was maybe spending his money, in a way that was abusing taxpayer dollars. Well, that should be the same thing. If he's voting anti-gay, and then keeping constant rumors and constant indications that he's gay, it should be the same thing. They should be investigating it.
There's another section on the book about some interesting polling data about how ingrained homophobia is too.
Yeah, there's some research in the book from people who study implicit association tests, and Harvard University and the University of North Carolina have this enormous database of millions of people who have taken these implicit association tests, and they look at race, gender, sexual orientation, kind of testing people's implicit bias. And what they found for a number of years with race was, and I think we all probably know this, right? Like, people will say one thing and then they still harbor racist attitudes.
Yeah.
But now they're finding it with sexual orientation in a big way as well. And part of that is progress. It means that explicitly people don't want to say anymore, like Governor Pence in Indiana, right? We don't discriminate. I don't discriminate. People don't want to say anymore that they are opposed to homosexuality. So that's a good thing. But again, this is where victory blindness comes in. We fool ourselves when we see these polls that say 70% of Americans believe, gays should have rights, or a majority believe gays should have marriage.
Right.
When they look at the implicit bias tests, they see that when they compare that to the polling, it's very, very small change. It's not nearly as much in implicit bias. And these tests are done, just as we were talking about the whole issue of intimacy, by showing people images of people being intimate and kind of rating how quickly they respond to various cues.
This book has so many great ideas and concepts in it. It's like, it could not come at a better moment. I could keep on talking for a long time because we've only just dug into a little bit of it, but if you can
look at it backwards.
Look at the book. Look at the title backwards. It's not over. It's not over the book.com is the website, and it's also available at all of your online bookstores. It's an amazing book. Give us some hearts if you want to read it. Thank you. And we'll be hearing a lot more about this book, I think, in the next week. It comes out on April 7th, correct?
April 7th. And but people can look online now and order it, or go to the bookstore. It's probably in the stores. And I just want to say that Andy, we're really great friends, but we also chat online about all this stuff all the time. And so much of what's in this book, he and I have chatted about over the past 2 years. So much of his work and the work he does on Towleroad is in this book, and I thank him for that as well.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you about any of that. Thank you guys all for tuning in. We really appreciate it, and I hope to do some more of these. It was really fun.
This was fun.
We will see you on the web.